Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
Jody Lynn, I have to tell you, I have really been looking forward to this particular interview today because our guest, Dr. Christine Boev, is into a topic that, as you know, I've been into for quite some time. That is, I intend to be around on this planet for quite some time, and I want to live it to the fullest, and I want to live it in the most healthy way possible. How better to get that conversation going even more than with an expert who's been studying all that stuff?
That's right.
Right? I mean, this is cool stuff. She describes it as anti-aging. Dr. Christine Boev, I would describe what you do as being pro-living. You're favor of living and living abundantly and long and full and just living to the hill. Now, am I wrong about that? I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but that's what I'm getting as a take when I read your stuff.
No. Well, you are 1000% correct, because if you're not living with abundance, then really what's the point? You can have a long life, right? But if you don't have high quality and joy and movement and all the things that bring us fulfillment, then really what is the point? So not only living a long lifespan, but my focus is having good quality health span along with it. And I've spent a lot of my energy understanding what are the best ways to achieve health span, and then sharing those with my students and with all of my clients, and then now with your audience, so that they can maybe adopt some of these practices to live a longer, happier, healthier life.
And one of the things, Christine, that I like about your work is that you do it from a number of different viewpoints, including from a scientific viewpoint, because you have a medical background. I believe you have an RA background. Do I remember correctly?
So I'm a PhD prepared registered nurse. I've spent most of my time in the intensive care unit, but I've also spent a lot of time in the OB area and labor and delivery as well. So I've seen the whole trajectory from birth to the end of life and everything in between. And there's so many things that we can do to really improve our outcomes in terms of health.
That is true. So give us the background about how you got to where you are today. I mean, because these kinds of paths always have beginning points that usually involve some kind of awakening or, oh my God moment or something like that. And we want to know what that OMG moment was for you.
Yeah. So I'm 48 years old, and when you get to the midpoint of your life, you start reexamining. For me, the big question it was probably like 3-ish or 4-ish years ago. Am I showing up every day as the best version of myself? And the answer really was not really. And then I went through this whole process of self-discovery to understand, okay, well, why not? And then what are some things that I can do to fix that? So I've always been athletic. I've always been able to, move my body in a purposeful way. But if you don't incorporate stress management and sleep hygiene and good nutrition along with the movement, then the rest of it doesn't really matter. So I get people that, contact me and they're like, Dr. Boev, help me with my nutrition. Well, that's just one piece of the puzzle, right? You can have the most beautiful nutrition on the planet, but if you don't move your body, then you're not going to have optimal health span. So really, Walt, that's what it was, is how do I show up as my best self every day for my children, my husband, my clients, my students, everybody. And I feel like I figured it out, where I'm living in a flow state where I feel really, really good, where I've optimized most areas of my life to the best of my ability. And to be completely honest, it's not that hard once you really understand what it is you're supposed to be doing.
And you set a very high goal, which I admire, by the way. I've actually set a higher goal, but you set a very high goal of living a full life to 120. And I got the feeling the way you said that is, and then we figure it out from there.
But not just live to 120, but I really want to be able to have the same exact mobility at 120 that I have right now. And I do feel like that is completely reasonable. And one of the things that happens as you get older is people slow down and they don't move their body. And once you start moving, you start dying. And that to me is the big thing. I love yoga. I think it's one of the best things that we can do for mobility. And I see people in my yoga class who are several decades older than I am, just crushing it every single day. So it's really that mentality of like, move it or lose it. And if you keep moving, you will have really good functionality and balance and all of those things that are important as we get older.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Now, Jody Lynn actually is an expert lately on movement because she's been doing a lot. She's a farm girl, so she's been doing farm girl stuff, lots and lots of movement. Maybe not yoga, but more like water systems. But
yeah, hey, you know what? Sometimes there's a downward dog in there on the grass. It happens, but it's interesting. You know what? I've had this peculiar relationship with movement. I am a farm girl. That's where my sabbatical is right now from coaching, and everything else in life is that I'm farming and all of that. And I've been really reflecting on that lately. It's not that I don't like moving my body, because I do. I love being able to go out and like move things and lift things. And I work with animals on our farm, and we have a big garden and all of that stuff. And I love being able to have the stamina to do some of those things and the muscles. And through this planting season, I've really noticed like the muscle definition and soreness in places that, I didn't expect. And it's been really telling. I've had this relationship with movement. I love yoga, but I've always hated the gym. And I think it came from maybe like ancestors, like my grandparents and my great grandparents, because they had a hard life, no running water, no electricity for the better part of their lives. So they didn't have time to get fat, as my grandma would say. They didn't have time to go to the gym because they were always outside doing something. And so I'm starting to evaluate that relationship and look at, okay, how can I get more movement in my day in ways that are pleasurable, things that I like to do, like being outside, just going for a walk or doing yoga outside, or, messing around with all the stuff that we have here. It's been interesting, but I agree 100%.
Yeah.
The movement piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as you get older too, just not losing that physicality and that mobility and all of those things that, allow you to do that work on the farm and don't prohibit you from being able to, carry out the things that keep the farm moving, and the carrying and the planting and all of those things is so important.
Yeah.
Mobility and movement are certainly high priority. In fact, I've been spending time focusing on that just because I've been going through some physical therapy over an issue I had in my right heel and in the Achilles area, and come to find out that there were certain muscles in my feet and in my lower leg area that were underdeveloped. I hadn't been doing anything with them, just because the way I would stand and walk and do things like that. So I'm having to relearn how to use those, and it's very educational in terms of, first of all, achieving the level of dexterity and flexibility you were kind of alluding to earlier, but also really appreciating how amazing our bodies are. I mean, it's incredible not only what they can do, but how they can also screw themselves up just by how you handle them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you talk about balance and dexterity, part of the things that we need to think about as we get older is really reducing our risk of falling, because the number one way that we're going to end up losing our functionality is if we fall and we break our hip or hit our head. And so being mindful of how we move, and so that we don't end up tripping or, stepping down on a step and missing something. It's those injuries that really could send us down a downward spiral in terms of our mobility and functionality. So yeah, dexterity, balance, mindfulness in terms of our movements are all so important in order to keep us at optimal health.
Yeah, so you mentioned mindfulness. Let's talk about mindset. That usually is involved in almost every conversation we have on every topic here on the show. But talk about it from this perspective, from the perspective of living that vibrant, healthy life.
Yeah. So in my experience, mindset training is really important when I'm working with clients in terms of optimizing their health and their nutrition. Mindset is so important. And I like to connect mindset back to self-worth and helping to prioritize what are the things that are going to help myself and those people around you live in abundance with each other and with ourselves. So mindset is so important, but oftentimes we've got to get to the core of what is preventing people from prioritizing their health and their wellness. And oftentimes what I find is it's that notion of worthiness. And do I have the self-worth to devote and invest in making myself better so that I can be better and show up better for people around me?
Yeah. Self-love, self-worth, self-confidence, self-esteem. Boy, it's amazing how much role they play. Yeah. It was a big topic of a conversation with yesterday's show. We had a clinical psychologist on the show, and he was talking about that in depth. And yeah, it's really, really important stuff. So, okay, that kind of gives us the lay of the land, so to speak. Let's talk in more detail about what you do when you're working with a client. I mean, well, first of all, why do people decide to come to you? What is it that makes them want to come to you as a coach?
Well, I think the first thing that they'll notice is my physicality. So as a 48-year-old female, I'm very fit and have a very athletic build. So just from like looking at me, you'll be like, oh, I think I want to look like her, which is great. But then it's more of how did she do that at this age? You know, how have I figured out how to be in literally the best shape of my life? I feel better. I look better than I've ever felt. And it's not just how we look, but that is initially what people, you know, they'll be going through Instagram or Facebook or whatever and be like, that's interesting. And so since I figured out how to optimize my own health, and I do have a background in healthcare, then, you know, you have the credibility where, okay, teach me, show me, what have you done to get this way? And so with most of my clients, it's really a holistic approach where we dive into nutrition pretty deeply because most people have no idea what they're supposed to be eating. We talk a lot about movement, and I really focus on strength training versus pretty much anything else. Stress is huge, and then looking at sleep as well, because if you're not sleeping, then you can't make the rest of those pieces work together.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Let's look at the nutrition piece next, because that is critical. It's also something that is a little confusing just because there's so much mixed information out there. So address that.
Yeah, I mean, most of my clients have no idea what they're supposed to be eating. We've heard that, you know, carbohydrates are bad for you and, you know, you should be drinking olive oil, and there's so many things, and there is no like magic bullet in terms of weight loss and fitness. You really need to eat a very balanced macronutrient diet. But one of the things that I have found is that we are very deficient in protein. So one of the first things that we tackle is getting enough high quality proteins. And usually it's 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. And that's where we start at. And then we build around your macronutrients around that protein goal. So most of my clients are on a macronutrient eating plan, and I never call it a diet because I think the word diet is really derogatory. But how do you fuel your body? So making sure that you're getting your protein, and then we do need to have carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the way that we fuel our body. But the problem is we don't get our carbohydrates from a box or a bag or, you know, a package. It really needs to come from high quality food sources. So fruits, vegetables, fruits and vegetables, rice, potatoes, things like that. So those are some of the things that are really important for fueling in terms of carbohydrates. Yeah. The other thing is protein. So most of your protein sources need to come from, you know, unless you're a vegetarian, which we can work with that, but I do a lot of chicken breast, turkey, lean beef, things like that. And then I do use protein powder. I think they're super helpful in terms of, meeting that protein requirement. Because if you're trying to take in 100, 120 grams of protein a day, that's a lot. So we've got to be really strategic in terms of how we do that.
And oh boy, I'm getting a loop of myself here. Where's that coming from? Okay. Well, hopefully that'll go away. But anyway, for those who are not necessarily cognizant of what the different protein levels are and how much protein you really need and so forth, what is it that's magic about 100 to 120 grams of protein a day?
I think it's good to have a benchmarking place to start, but for most of my clients, they're trying to build muscle. So they're trying to put some muscle on their frame. And that's really where the science shows that if you're going to try to put some muscle on your frame, that 1 gram per pound of body weight is the starting point. Some people go higher, but I think it gets a little bit unrealistic in terms of, going higher than that. The big part about, eating the protein is the focus of my fitness program is strength training. When you're strength training, you are breaking down muscle, right? You're doing squats and lunges and things, and you're breaking down muscle. Well, then you've got to rebuild. And so that's why having that protein right after you have a good strength training workout is really important, because you're allowing for protein synthesis to occur. You're saying, all right, muscles, all right, do your job, build back up. Here's the fuel that you need to do that. So that's kind of where that comes from. When you have more muscle on your frame, you are more metabolic. So your metabolic powerhouse, your calorie burn is more efficient. You burn calories more efficiently versus if you have more fat on your frame. And so it's really important from a health span perspective, to put as much muscle on your frame as possible. I'm not saying that you should become a bodybuilder. I don't agree with that at all. But you do want to have a decent amount of lean muscle on your frame in order to maintain optimal health.
So if it's 1 gram per pound and you're saying 100 to 120, that sounds like you're aiming more at what a woman would need to do rather than what a man would need to do.
Well, if you're a man, you're big, if you're 200 pounds and you're going to go for 200 grams. My husband is 220 pounds and his goal is to take in 220 grams of protein a day.
Oh, it really is? Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And what makes a protein a quality protein?
Well, I think you've got to be careful. I try to stay away from like protein bars. If you go into the nature section of the grocery store, you really want to make sure it comes from a source, that is, I like organic. A lot of our proteins come from cows, right? And so where did that cow come from? Is it an organic cow? Was it grass fed? And it'll tell you right where you get your proteins from, how that protein was sourced. So you don't want, I call them junk proteins. And a lot of your traditional protein bars that you can get, like grab and go, tend to come from junk proteins. And so I think it's just smarter to get the highest quality sources as possible. And so I typically buy organic in terms of my meats, my dairy, my yogurt, and things like that, which just gives you the best possible quality without having the additional growth hormone and antibiotics and things like that that tend to get into our food sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting into the food sources, that's always an interesting topic of conversation right there, because there are different feelings and different opinions about that. Most of the people who appear on this program are people who are going to say, yeah, go natural, go organic. You're better off that way. But there are plenty of people who say, well, that's really just a bunch of unscientifically oriented bunk. It doesn't really have any science behind it. Is there science behind it?
I think there's definitely science behind it. I think the way that we raise our meats, the way that we industrialize the meat processing area has led to the fact that girls get their period now much, much earlier than they did, say, 30 years ago. Our kids are bigger. And it's a lot of it has to do with the meat and the dairy and all of the additives, the antibiotics that we put into our food source. So for me, and as a mom, I've always been really careful about what I introduce to my children's diet because I don't want them to be negatively impacted by all of those things. I think antibiotic resistance has come largely in part of the fact that we give the chickens, the cows, everybody's getting antibiotics, and it gets into our systems. So we really need to be mindful about that. And as a healthcare provider, I've seen numerous instances of people who have developed infections that we don't have the antibiotics to take care of those different types of bacteria. And that's a scary place to be.
Do you think it happens primarily because of what we're taking in through the food supply?
I think that has a large part to do with it because all of those animals are given large doses of antibiotics, and those antibiotics translate and they come into our bodies. And it's interesting, right? So we're getting micro dosing of different types of antibiotics that we don't need, right? And so when these bacteria start to, mutate and change, they've already seen the variations of the different types of antibiotics. And they're like, yeah, I've seen that. That's not going to hurt me. And that's where we get into the, methicillin resistant staph and the vancomycin resistant enterococci that end up, being a huge cause of mortality, especially in the healthcare system. So I think it's something people really need to pay attention to. And I think we have been, because you'll notice the organic section in the grocery stores is a lot bigger. I think those types of items have become more affordable, which is really important. It should be affordable to everybody, not just, the high income earners. Aldi's has done a great job of introducing lots of different organic options at good prices. So, I think as a society, we're waking up to the fact that we've got to really pay attention to what we're putting into our bodies.
Yeah, I think so too. By the way, Jody Lynn, I muted you just because I realized that we have a loop coming through you. If you can get some headphones on there, that'll cut down on some of the background noise that we've been getting.
My headphones are dead. So.
Your headphones are dead? Oh, no! No!
Or else I put them on, but I can mute after. So
okay, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a full loop or what's going on, but I kind of noticed that.
It's like a couple things going on, yeah. But anyway, muting it will help a lot.
Okay. So what's interesting? I just heard about this group of individuals anyway in Europe, that was like, they were on the coast, they were very isolated, and they weren't a part of, the mainstream population, like what we've done with westernizing the culture. Anyway, when those people were introduced to the world that is today, their lifespan was at like 130, 140 average. And They were fine. They were amazing. And then now that they've introduced the foods that, we have in the West and all of the garbage, like you were talking about, their lifespan has now dropped down to 100. So I think I was never a huge fan of organic, being, a farmer growing up on a farm. I didn't really understand it. And I'm from Canada. So realizing now that I have friends in Texas, going to the grocery store in the United States is a completely different experience than in Alberta, where I'm from, or like the small grocery store in the small town where I grew up. Because a lot of the meat is local here and not corn fed, just different quality of meat here than in the states that I've experienced. It's closer to the organic, but I'm really starting to see how that makes an impact with your overall health. Like you were saying, Christine, that it's huge, all of the, extra estrogen and all of these other things that are impacting all of these other things. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we're learning more and more every day, aren't we? I mean, it's not like this has been a new thing that has popped up out of nowhere. It's been around for a while. But this is a good part. Research either of the official kind or of the small individual practitioner variety, is being done in greater amounts every single day. And we're learning more from that, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think our awareness is so much, we're more in tune, right? And we're paying attention and we understand what it means for something to be organic or grass-fed or cage-free. And we're more knowledgeable as a society about what we're putting into our bodies because, we've seen so many chronic diseases just really skyrocket, especially obesity. I mean, obesity in the United States is at such epidemic levels. Over half of the country is either overweight or obese. And it's gone like this. It didn't used to be like that. And so much of it has to do with how we eat, processed foods, everything's in a bag or a package. And then things that are, good for you are more difficult to come by. They're more expensive and they're less accessible. And so we've done ourselves a huge disservice as a country to get to this point where we have such an epidemic in terms of obesity. If you are obese or overweight, your risk of cancer has doubled. All of the cancers, it's doubled. High blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, those are all directly related to obesity. So you're not going to live till 120 if you are carrying extra weight on your frame. And so we've got to be honest with ourselves about how important it is to combat obesity. But it's one of the hardest things to do. People struggle every day. It's not that most people don't want to lose weight. They don't know how. And they're given so much information and they're struggling. And so that's why podcasts like this are so important, to provide information to help people sort out through all the noise. Okay, what do I need to do? Just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. Because I do want to live a long life. I do want to roll on the floor with my grandchildren. I do want to be present.
Yeah. And that really describes it in a nutshell, what the issue is, because there is so much information out there. Which one do you pick? Which information do you go with? Which one do you ignore? And they'll contradict each other. They'll point fingers at each other. I mean, it's a nightmare trying to sort the whole thing out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to go to the source and really understand for yourself where this information is coming from. When we went through this whole low carb phenomenon and, at the end of the day, the bottom line to that whole notion of eat low carbs, lose weight is you've got to be in a calorie deficit. And eating low carbs was just one way to get into a calorie deficit. You just can't stay there. It's not sustainable to just eat fat and protein and not have carbohydrates. They're your main fueling source. And so, most clients, they start off, okay, what is your goal? Let's figure out, okay, what does your calories need to look like? Because you have to measure them. And then how do we get you in a sustainable calorie deficit where you're not dying and starving and miserable, right? So that you're losing just a couple of pounds a week until you get to your goal, by eating the right proportion of macronutrients. And it's not that difficult, but oftentimes we just need some help understanding what it is we're supposed to do.
So this is a very easy question for me to ask because I ask it all the time, but is this another example of where you really need to have somebody to mentor you, to coach you, to guide you?
I know for me, any hard things I've ever done in my life have been accomplished through mentors. I think mentors are really important in all aspects of our life. It's the mentorship, but it's also just the accountability piece, checking in. How are you doing? What do you need? With my clients, we meet every week on Zoom and it's great. I do a little lesson and then we all kind of talk to each other like, how's it going? What are you struggling with? What are your wins? But having that sense of community really makes you realize, okay, I'm not alone in this. I've got this. I've got support. I've got support of other men and women who are, going through the same journey that I'm going through. And, with community and with mentorship and with accountability, that's how you're really successful because you're cheering each other on along the way. And there's nothing better than that, right? It's to share your wins with other people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jody Lynn, I got to ask you, because you're in your mid-30s, and I was thinking back to when I was in my mid-30s, and I can't honestly say I was giving any attention at all to what my physical state would be, twice the lifetime It just wasn't part of the thought. Oh, I'm getting the big right now. Oh. Hopefully that goes away pretty quick. But, I mean, what's your mindset where all this is concerned? I mean, do you think about this, or is this something that's not on the radar yet?
Oh, no, totally on the radar. I think I've been thinking about this since I was like 27. I've done yo-yo dieting. I've, done drastic things, the no carbs, the whatever, to try and lose weight, and it wasn't sustainable. I have done all sorts of different things to get there. And I agree with you, Christine, that you're inundated with all this information, and you're like, which one is the right one? So, yeah, for me, I've definitely been thinking about it, because I too want to live until, I'm 120 or, 130, whatever, but have that, like you were saying, Christine, not just living in a bed somewhere in a hospital or whatever, but actually having that mobility, that life that you still have today. And I see my parents as they age. I watch my dad has started to do like Qigong and started to like walk more and stuff. And it's impacted everything in his life, his mental state, his health. Like, he's still carrying a few extra pounds that he could get rid of, but I see he looks different now than he did even 5 years ago. And I look at my mom, who's not, and who is just historically has more challenges with her health and illnesses and stuff like that, but is way more sedentary, and it shows. And I don't want to be like that. I want to be healthy. So it's definitely something that's been on my mind for a long time. How can I keep my brain healthy and my body healthy?
Yeah, and I think, like, as you get older, getting into hobbies and things that you're, passionate about, like, and I don't know about where you guys are, but I'm in Rochester, New York. Pickleball is crazy popular.
Oh, it's huge around here. I'm in Connecticut. Same thing.
Yeah. So, like, getting into some sort of activity that, challenges you physically, but also brings you community so that you're not isolated and alone as you get older. I've got clients who golf, they do, running, walking, but those activities where you're socializing, yet you're, doing something physically is really, really important, especially as you get older. Maybe you retire, you step away from your career. You've got to fill that void with things that give you purpose. And things that are, require active movement are really good to fill that, okay, my career's done. Now what am I going to do moving forward?
How would you describe the level of importance where connecting movement with human interaction is concerned? In other words, our connections with friends, family, relatives, primary relationship, spouses, coworkers, everywhere along the line. But we have relationships all over the place, but I don't think we normally think about relationships in terms of, what kind of movement we're doing, unless we have a pickleball partner or something like that. But beyond that, we don't think about it too far. But from my perspective, I think actually it's a fairly important piece, and I think we kind of overlook it.
Yeah, I think it's huge because we're social creatures, right? And we thrive on interactions. And when we think about living in abundance, we're, those relationships and that energy that we share with other people is so important. So whatever the activity it is, for me, like, my community outside of like just going to the gym is yoga. I go to one yoga studio. I walk in. I feel like I'm at home every time I enter the studio. I know most of the people. They're my people, right? That's my community. We go on retreats. It's wonderful. To have that is really important. Now, some people find that community at the gym. I have an 18-year-old son, and he goes to the gym with his buddies, and that's their community. And so however you find that, it doesn't matter what it is, but aligning mobility with social interaction is really a wonderful synergistic partnership where people thrive when they have that opportunity to do that. And I feel like as a society, we've created so many more of those opportunities that there probably didn't exist 30 years ago.
True.
And so you've got, golf and tennis and all of those, ways that you can interact with other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in fact, for my own community is dance. I'm very much into partner dancing, social dancing, and exactly the same thing. One of the reasons I got involved with it is because of the social connections. Plus, it's a really fun way to exercise and to move your body and so forth. But to me, the combination is what makes it so potent. Because, like you said, I walk into the dance studio and I know most of the people there, and they're like you said, they're my people. I know them. I see them every single week. There they are, and those connections are important.
The other thing that's huge is jujitsu and different types of martial arts. People in those spaces, boy, the physicality is there, but that sense of community amongst those in your studio is huge. Yeah. So, you see a lot of that, and it's great. And you can start that type of stuff when you're really young and continue, forever, really rolling around on a mat with somebody. I've always wanted to try it. I just never have.
What would it take? I'm curious.
Your next thing.
Not much. I'm pretty much up for anything.
Okay. Jody Lynn, were you going to jump in with something?
I said that's the next thing that Christine should try.
Oh,
yeah. I've thought about it before.
That loop is really, really bad. Sorry, were you going to say something? I muted you, but I just wanted to stop the loop. Go ahead and say something.
That's okay. I was just going to say that I find that when you're doing group activities with all these other people, it kind of keeps you accountable to go and keep showing up and, whatever. Oh, I don't want, Betty not to see me there. Or like, I'm going to see this person there or that person. So I think the community is huge, and it keeps you motivated to keep going, and it's part of the fun of doing it. And I think that's where my mentality was failing when it was going to the gym, because I never thought it was fun. I never developed any sort of community there, but I liked sports and I liked being out on the farm and I liked doing all these other things, and just really opening up my mindset to working out doesn't actually have to just be this one thing only. It can be all of these things. It's the movement.
And I think too, Jody Lynn, you've got to find something you enjoy. So I feel bad for people who are like, I hate working out. It's awful. It's torture. That's got to be really hard. But there's so many options. I'm like, all right, well, try water aerobics, try Zumba. Like, what do you like to do? And let's tap into that. As long as you're moving your body in some way, I really don't care what you're doing. Right? But anything is better than sitting there and just rotting. So figure that out. But I've always felt bad for people who are like, I hate to exercise, because for me, I absolutely love to exercise. I love the way I feel when it's over. You've got that endorphin release. I love everything about it. And I guess I'm just lucky in that regard that I enjoy it, and what has happened is we've role modeled that to our children. So now our kids, it's just part of who they are. Like, they like to work out. They like to go to the gym. So whatever it is that you do choose to do, just remember you're role modeling to anybody who's paying attention to what you're doing. And you're role modeling a positive behavior that's improving your health. So, in that respect, it's an amazing thing.
I think probably one of the biggest keys as well is to, if you're sedentary, if you're not really engaging in any kind of activity, just try a few. Just try something you haven't tried before. Try something you weren't really sure what it was, and I don't know. I kind of heard good things, but I don't know if I'd like it. Just go once. You don't have to sign up for a year's package. Just try it once and see if there's anything there that you like. If that one doesn't work, then try something else.
Yeah, you might be surprised. You just never know.
I ended up in dance almost by accident, and it turned out to be one of the great loves of my life. And I never would have predicted that. When I was in my 20s, if you had told me that dance was going to be a big part of my life for the rest of my life, I would have looked at you like, are you crazy? I'm not a dancer. I don't look like a dancer. There's no way I could be and here I am. I'm a dancer.
What kind of dance do you do, Walt?
The whole range of partner dances. So swing, hustle, the ballroom dances, Latin dances, almost all of the the structured partner dancing.
And do you compete?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there are people who do that, but most people who are involved in dance do not compete. First of all, none of us want to make ourselves so highly skilled that we could be competitors. We're just doing it for the fun of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned how people have this aversion to working out and to exercise. One of the most important things that I do is I don't think about it as exercise or working out. I think of it as going fun and having dancing. I mean, exercise is definitely part of it. It is a form of a workout. I just don't think of it that way. And so I don't get locked into these patterns of, oh God, I got to go work out at the dance studio. No, it never feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like I get to go dancing. It's an entirely different feel.
Mm-hmm. You never know. If this podcast blows up, you might end up on Dancing with the Stars.
No, not a chance.
Why not, Mom?
Because it's competitive. I'm not a competitive dancer. I mean, if they can rewrite Dancing with the Stars so it's no longer a competition, yeah, then I might do that, sure. But I'm not a dance competitor. I don't want to compete in dance. To me, that would actually ruin it, to be honest.
Okay.
It really would. Because, well, first of all, you have a much more limited set of dance partners. There are only a small segment who go off to do the competition. So you miss out on this huge range of dance partners you wouldn't have. Talk about the social connection. That to me is one of the biggest pieces. How many people are there?
That's really cool.
Yeah. But it just goes to prove, like you said, any kind of movement matters. And if you can find a form that you like, go for it. Try it. And don't get tied up into whether or not society or official experts or whatever consider it to be good exercise. You're moving. Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very important. Okay, so we've talked about nutrition. We've talked about movement. What were some of the other factors that are involved here?
So the two other big ones are sleep and stress management.
Oh,
they're everything.
We only have 19 minutes left, but we got to cover those. So let's start with sleep. That's the shorter one. Stress management, that's like a whole show right there. But
yeah. So sleep hygiene is probably the most important of the factors that influence health and wellness, because if you do not get high quality sleep, then you can't expect your body to perform at a high level, even if you are fueling it properly. And so, again, as a society, we are chronically sleep deprived. We stay up too late. We get up too early, and we spend way too much time on our screens. And so one of the big things is the blue light from our televisions, our computers, our tablets, our phones. It basically tricks your brain into thinking that it needs to be, wide awake. And so being cognizant of, I always say like 90 minutes before whatever it is time you go to bed, like be done. Even if you have the night vision on and the blue light off on your screen, you're still signaling to your brain like, hey brain, like I need you wide awake. I need you functioning. And so limiting screens is huge, especially for kids. My gosh, the kids, they struggle probably the most because they're on screens more than any generation right now. The other thing is timing. So in a perfect world, you really want to get to bed at the same time every night and get up around the same time every morning. And I know that can be tricky, especially on the weekends. I'm guilty of this. Like on a Saturday, I'm like, oh, I don't really have to get up, but I know I should, at least around an hour of getting up around the same time. And that just programs your body to be like, okay, it's time to go to bed. It's time to get up. I try to get 7 hours of sleep a night. I think that is important. There's a lot of health coaches out there that they sleep 4 hours a night. I mean, good for them. But again, my goal is to live a long life. And I know in order to do that, I've got to rest my brain. And so, my kids know like 9:30, I'm in bed, I'm reading a book. And by 10 o'clock, like lights are out in my house. I'm done, and my husband knows that as well. And then I'm usually up around 5 or 6 every morning. I track my sleep. I have an Oura ring. It's this little ring that I wear. It tracks everything. It tracks your heart rate, your temperature, your heart rate variability. And so if I wake up and I'm like, oh, I feel kind of crummy, I can look at my sleep score on my Oura ring and it'll say like, hey, that really wasn't the best night of sleep. If you don't get a great night's sleep, try to take a power nap during the day. I think like a 20-minute power nap is super beneficial. It's way better than coffee to just kind of give you that extra jolt of energy. The Europeans totally have it right? They all take a nap at 2:00. It's because our cortisol levels go up right around that time, right? Take a nap, feel better, but really like 20 minutes is all you need. You've got to be really careful about caffeine. So some people are very sensitive to caffeine, where other people, they could drink it all day long and it doesn't matter. But for the most part, caffeine will affect your sleep. So for me, like noon is my cutoff. I don't have any caffeine after noon. Again, just because I know that my body is sensitive to caffeine and I want to get a good night's sleep. And the other thing is just sunlight, exposure to sunlight, getting outside. Lola, my dog, she goes out right away. I go out with her. I try to figure out where the sun is in the sky and just kind of look towards the sun. It signals into your eyeballs like, okay, it's time to wake up, and it gets those circadian rhythms moving. The last thing I would say is temperature. The temperature of your room, the temperature of, your sheets, your bed. You really want to sleep in a cooler room, and around 65 degrees if possible is optimal to get a good night's sleep. But you'll wake up if you've had a good night's sleep, and you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good. And actually, that's not the last thing. The last thing I will say about this is the snooze button is the devil. The worst thing that you can do is to hit that snooze button in the morning, because basically what it does is it cycles you in and out of junk sleep in the morning, and you're just going to feel more tired. So whatever strategies that you need, put your alarm far away, but just get up, and once your feet hit the ground, you're like, okay, I'm up no matter what. So I get up, I make my bed right away so I can't go back in it, and I never hit the snooze button.
Very interesting. And you're highlighting for me things that are different from what I do. I don't wake up to an alarm clock. I haven't awakened to an alarm clock in 25 years. And I've forgotten that people do that, but they do that. That's part of the life for most people. And I'm kind of throwing myself back to, wow, what if I was still doing that? But interesting thing is, you mentioned the idea of relatively going to sleep, relatively waking up around within an hour of the same time every single day. And I find that even without the alarm clock, I do that anyway. It's not like I have to work at it.
Hygiene.
What's that?
You have good sleep hygiene. That's amazing. And the fact that you don't need an alarm clock really speaks volumes that your body knows what time you're getting up, right? Because you're well rested and you're like, okay, I'm up, ready to go.
And even if I'm not, my cat is telling me anyway, so it doesn't matter.
No, but really, that's a superpower to be able to get up without an alarm and to just be like, okay, I'm ready to start my day. Most people cannot do that. So kudos to you.
Well, you know what happened was, now part of this came about because I became a self-employed entrepreneur. So I didn't have to be at a particular site, at a particular place, in a particular parking space, at a particular desk at 7:39 a.m. or whatever it was. That went away. But I also knew I needed to maintain a certain degree of self-discipline in order to make the whole thing work properly. And somewhere along the line, I just decided I'm going to try going without the alarm just to see what happens, because I didn't have that need to be at a particular place at exactly the right time. And I did go through a period of variation where, one day I was waking up really early. The next day I was waking up really late. Sometimes I'd sleep through to like 10. So I went through that kind of a pattern for a bit. But after about 6 months, it kind of settled in. It's not like I had to work at it. I think it's kind of built into our bodies that we need to wake up within a certain range. We need to go to sleep at a certain range. I think it's just kind of part of who we are as human beings.
I totally would have given up. I wouldn't have waited the 6 months.
Jody Lynn, we're having trouble hearing you. We're hearing background noise, but you're not coming through real well. Try that once more.
How about now?
Much better. There we go.
I would have given up. I wouldn't have waited the 6 months or kept with it. I just wouldn't have been able to do that. But I have a question for you, Christine. Do men and women need different amounts of sleep? And if so, how much?
I don't think there's a difference in terms of gender and how much sleep that you need. But I will say I have a theory about moms. So I think once you're a mom, it's really difficult to fully like be in that deep, deep sleep when you're responsible for children. Now, I have not done any studies about this, but this is my own, experience that like, until my kids are in the house and in their bed, like I really can't sleep that well. But most humans, regardless of gender, need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And it depends on the quality of your sleep. And that's why I like to track my sleep, because it'll tell me how much deep sleep I've gotten. And you're supposed to get 30% of your sleep is supposed to be deep sleep. And that's intense, right? You are just like down. And then about 30% is supposed to be that REM sleep, that rapid eye movement where you're dreaming, right? But you can't move. And then you've got your light sleep, which really isn't all that helpful. If you are an expert sleeper, and I follow these people on Instagram, and it's fascinating, and they'll be like half and half, like deep sleep and REM sleep. And I'm like, that is incredible. I am lucky to get 30% deep sleep. But the importance of that is when you're in deep, deep sleep, it activates your lymphatic system. And basically what that is it's a system that washes the cerebrospinal fluid out of your brain. And if you don't get enough deep sleep, then you don't get that proper brainwashing that needs to happen. And so that helps declutter those tau and amyloid proteins that are associated with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And so sleep is just so important. I can't stress it enough that, if you want to change one thing about your life right now, clean up your sleep act, and that's going to like change your life for sure.
I love this, a positive use of the word brainwashing.
Yeah.
We don't get that very often.
People don't even realize that it's a thing, but it's so important. Like that lymphatic washing that happens, gets rid of the stuff that causes chronic degenerative diseases.
I had no idea.
Yeah. And that's why we've got to prioritize sleep. It's so important.
I'll throw in another argument in favor of alarmless sleeping, because I get a lot of deep sleep, and I think it's partly because I don't have an alarm.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's going to come at different points in the night too. It's not like it always happens at the same part of the night for me.
You track?
I don't track it in writing, but there have been times where I kind of mentally kept track, and I'll go through periods where I get my deepest sleep from like 11 to 3. And then there are other nights where I get my deepest sleep from like 4 to 7. And it varies. Sometimes it bounces all over the place, but there are often periods of time where like, 7, 10, 14, 21 days in a row, I'm getting the same kind of sleep pattern. And then I switch over to something else. I've never figured out why.
Yeah. And, besides caffeine, alcohol will also impact your sleep. People think, oh, I'm going to sleep so good. I had a couple glasses of wine. Well, what happens is you will sleep really good in the first third of the night, and then a switch turns on when the alcohol metabolizes out of your body. And then the second 2/3 of your night are terrible. That alcohol will really mess with your sleep. So if you found that like, oh, I had a couple glasses of wine, I slept really poorly. Yeah, that's actually a thing.
I actually don't drink alcohol or caffeine, so it's not particular to my situation, but I can see how that would definitely play a role. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's the moon cycle.
Oh, well, as an ex-labor nurse, I could tell you all sorts of stories about the moon and it's crazy what happens.
Do you think it actually affects sleep?
The moon, probably. I don't know enough about it to really comment. All I know is that when there was a full moon, women would come in and the babies would just be like, okay, here we are. So it was definitely a thing. But yeah, I think moon cycles, there's a lot to that, and I would love to learn more about it.
Okay, very cool. Well, of course, we've limited it down to like 5 minutes left, and we have barely touched stress, which is like a 3-show series right there. But let's see what we can do in a few minutes on stress.
Yeah. So the biggest thing about stress that your audience can take away is just recognizing the powerful role that cortisol plays in our life. So cortisol is your stress hormone, and it's released by your adrenal glands. And we're in this state of like, we're so busy all the time. Like people like to brag like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like that's unfortunate. We almost glorify busyness, right? And what happens is that cortisol is just constantly spiking. The other thing related to cortisol that I talk about my clients with is cardio. When you're doing long bouts of cardio in terms of exercise, like the elliptical, the Stairmaster, whatever, your body thinks that you're being chased by a lion. It really doesn't know what's going on. And so those types of exercises are also chronically spiking your cortisol. Well, cortisol tells your brain, hey, you better store some more fat, and it's counterintuitive. And so stress management is huge, trying to keep your cortisol to a manageable place. We need it. We'll die without it. But when it's too high, it really wreaks havoc on our life. So some strategies. So sleep is directly related to stress. If you are well rested, you will be able to manage your stress better. And then what are some things that we can do in those moments, right, of stress? So I like to do 4-count box breathing where I inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And if you do that for just a minute, it's amazing what that impact will be on your sympathetic nervous system. It's almost like, all right, calm down. And you're really using your breath as a tool to regulate your heart rate and to just get your whole nervous system to calm down. So I like to do, it's called box breathing. I meditate. I think meditation is one of the hardest things to do. It's taken me years to figure out how to like actually do it. I used to sit there and be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And my brain wouldn't stop working. But I've done some meditation workshops, and meditation is very, very powerful in terms of reducing stress. And then the last thing I love is essential oils. I have a whole toolkit of different essential oils that I'll use for various reasons. I keep essential oils in my office. I diffuse peace and calming very often, just so everyone around me is just, taken down a notch. But there are a lot of great ways. And then exercise. I mean, exercise will take care of stress in a minute. So the next time you're feeling super stressed out, instead of reaching for the bag of Oreos, go for a walk. It is amazing how you're going to feel after you just get your body moving, release some of that stress, get your heart rate up, and get those endorphins released, which are the counteractive ingredient to cortisol.
Yeah. Jody Lynn, when you listen to that list, is there one that jumps out to you? That's my go-to when I'm trying to release that cortisol, that I'm trying to release the stress levels.
I think all of them. I love the essential oils. I mean, I always have some on hand. I want some of them on my desk here, always. I love the diffuser meditation. I think is so huge. So those would be the two that I would lean towards for sure.
Yeah. Meditation for me also, and walks. I love, how much I love walks. And like you, Christine, meditation was a hard one for the longest time. I finally realized after having lots of conversations with people here on the show, people who were into it and knew how to teach it and so forth, that my biggest problem was I was making too much of a deal out of it. All I had to do was just sit quiet and be, whatever happens, happens. It's okay. No big deal. Your mind wanders. Okay. It wandered. Okay. Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm doing this wrong. I'm failing at meditation. And
right.
You can't.
It's impossible to fail meditation. But we get all worked up in, that's part of the whole competitive thing. Like, we have to be the best at something, right? If we aren't the best at whatever it is we're trying to do, then we're failing.
And we can't, if we don't do it perfectly, then it's not the right way, or it's not good enough. It's not going to be effective.
Yeah, 100%.
We are so good at beating the crap out of ourselves. We're just champions. If we want to be a champion at something, okay, recognize that we're champions at that and then retire from it.
And that spikes our cortisol.
Yes, right.
The cycle goes around.
It really does.
Our new goal can be champions of humility.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Christine Boev, first of all, thank you for joining us because this has been a great conversation. Someone who wants to get some help with this, wants to get a little mentorship, a little coaching, how do they reach out to you if they want to reach out to you about this?
Yep, I'm on Instagram at it's Dr. Christine Boev. And just send me a message. I'm happy to do a quick Zoom and figure out if we're a good fit.
All right. That sounds good. One thing I like to do at the end of each of these shows is to basically remind the guest in particular, because all the guests who come on, like you, we're givers in life. That's one of the reasons you end up on the show, because you like to give information, help people out and so forth. And there are many people that we never meet and never see who we're helping, but we don't get any credit for it either. So I like to give some credit for it by saying, on behalf of those people you've never met, you've never seen, who have been consuming your content, your material here on this podcast and in your writings and so forth, on their behalf, thank you for what you've been doing, because you are making a difference in their lives, and you may not see it, but it's happening.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely.
I think it's really important. Jody Lynn, you got any last words of wisdom before we wind it up for the day?
Loved this episode. I love that, we're just bringing this into our society, having these conversations, being more open about what it looks like. Because I think that will be the turning point for the generation and the next generation. And the next generation is seeing that longevity and that abundant life is possible. And we just have to pay more attention to what's going on with us. So thank you for what you do, Christine. Appreciate it. And I love this conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
We loved it too. Thank you, Jody Lynn. Thank you, Dr. Christine Boev. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.